All Bones Considered, Laurel Hill Stories number 77 for August 2025. Some College Namesakes, Part 1.
Stony plots that are covered with thorn. Who are these names at peace? Who are these names at peace? Who are these names at peace? Who are these names at peace?
Laurel Hill East is a National Historic Landmark, an arboretum, a sculpture garden, a nature preserve, and an active cemetery in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It opened in 1836 and remains a popular visiting spot for tens of thousands of visitors every year. Its sister cemetery, Laurel Hill West, located across the Schuylkill River in Bala Cynwyd, was founded in 1869. It has a history and a population of its own. I am Dr. Joe Lex, retired professor of emergency medicine at Temple University in Philadelphia, volunteer tour guide at Laurel Hill East and Laurel Hill West, and volunteer podcaster. If you are a fan of All Bones Considered and biographical bites from Bala, the book is being published on September 23rd. Finally, we have a publication date for All Bones Considered, 52 Laurel Hill Women. I will have some pre-publication copies, and I will be at the Market of the Macabre, which is September 20th, to sell copies and to shill copies of the book. Before I forget, this book I wrote entirely voluntarily. I'm going to try to recoup some of my costs for it, but $10 of the purchase price of this, the book is only $33. In Pennsylvania, that means with 6% tax, it's $35, $34.98. And it's a big book. It's 520 pages of text plus another 20-some pages of index. But you're going to hear me talking about this book more and more later in this podcast and in pretty much every future podcast. This podcast, the August 2025 episode of All Bones Considered Laurel Hill Stories, tells of people with colleges and universities named for them, but just part one. And I got myself into trouble on this. I put a deadline on myself that I didn't keep. So odds are very good that when you listen to this on August 1st, it will be an incomplete program. I wanted to start with Charles McAllister, whose contribution to a Presbyterian college in Minnesota led to McAllister University. And Charles McAllister also introduced and built the river mansion Glengarry, which later became Glen Ford, and in the process he founded and invented the town of Torresdale. If you don't hear his long story if you don't hear his story in the long version of the podcast, you will find it as an individual episode. I'm going to try to put it out on August 2nd, if I can. Henry Biddle died from wounds he received at the Battle of Glendale. Money donated by his wife caused the founding of Biddle University for Freedmen, which is now Johnson C. Smith University. Biddle's story as an individual podcast is released on August 3rd. Joseph Horton was a consummate Quaker businessman. After he made literally several fortunes, he was primary donor to Swarthmore College, but his crowning glory was the establishment of the Horton Business School. His story will come out on August 4th. Antoinette Westfall was a Drexel dragon through and through. And a few years after her death from breast cancer, her husband Ray made a sizable donation to Drexel, which renamed its College of Media and Design the Antoinette Westphal College. Her Story is an individual podcast, comes out on August 5th. So who am I skipping? Well, Joseph Moore, the Moore College of Art, Eleanor Widener of Widener University, Thomas Clemson, his son founded Clemson University, and Thomas B. Stetson of Stetson University in Florida. But I think I've got enough to keep us busy and entertained and educated, so let's get started. Captain Henry Jonathan Biddle, 1817-1862, College for Freedmen. Spencer Fullerton Baird Biddle, 1859-1929, introducing the Highland Cow. With the Emancipation Proclamation, the Civil War's end, and the ratification of the 13th Amendment, slavery was abolished in the United States. The nation then faced the challenge of integrating millions of newly freed people into a white majority society. Deportation wasn't feasible. There simply weren't enough boats. Continued segregation was not humane. The only path forward was for the formerly enslaved to stay, become citizens, and pursue advancement. When finally offered opportunities, formerly enslaved individuals quickly adapted to new economic and social realities and showed remarkable progress within a short period. In the upper South of North Carolina, which was primarily home to small farmers rather than large plantation owners, the enslaved African Americans within her borders may have had a different attitude towards life than in the Deep South. They were more a part of the family, and the whites may have been more sympathetic toward them. I think this was the beginning of the old racial saw that in the South, white people didn't care how close black people got if they didn't get too big, while in the North, white people didn't care how big black people got if they didn't get too close. For one thing, before the war, North Carolina had many free people of color who were rather well educated. They did not associate with the slaves. Between 1790 and 1860, the number of free Negroes increased more than sixfold, from 4,975 to 30,464. However, they formed only 3.3% of the total population, or 8.4% of the black population. The slave population in 1860 was 331,059. That's 1/3 of the population of the state of North Carolina. These are the people who had to be absorbed, and the free Negroes formed the nucleus for the absorption of the newly freed men. In 1850, 79% of the freed Negroes of North Carolina over 21 years of age were literate. Now, that compares with 87% of the whites over 21. Before the school, not only were there no schools for the Negroes, but neither white nor black, slave nor freedman was permitted to teach a slave to read or write under the penalty of a fine, imprisonment, and lashes. Some people maintained that the Negro could not be educated. Others just thought it was useless. But the Freedmen's Bureau, the philanthropists of the North, and above all, the African Americans themselves were determined that they should have an opportunity for an education. Between 1865 and 1869, the Freedmen's Bureau spent more than $200,000 in North Carolina educating the Negroes. All were welcome to learn. In one classroom, a small child sat with her mother, her grandmother, and her great-grandmother as they all learned to read together. The State Assembly of 1865-6 legalized the teaching of freedmen apprentices to read and write. But before much else was accomplished, the United States Congress, using the Reconstruction Acts, threw North Carolina, along with all the other seceded states except Tennessee, under military government. So it wasn't until 1867-8 that North Carolina made her constitution. Before this, however, Northern teachers had come into the state. In at least 2 towns of the state, the whites had set up schools for the freedmen. Mechanics were training apprentices. Even literate boys and girls would teach the untaught freedmen. And in the Sunday schools, whites gave them Bible instruction. Moreover, the freedmen were teaching each other. Before the end of Reconstruction period, many Northern agencies were set up in the South schools whose chief interest was the enlightenment of the freedmen, but they did not limit their work to that race alone. Numerous Northern societies and religious bodies also engaged in this work, especially the Quakers, the Episcopalians, and the Presbyterians. They were the most active. In 1869, these agencies enrolled 11,826 pupils, and the Freedmen's Bureau had 431 schools in the state, where 439 teachers instructed 20,000 pupils. I talked about one of the volunteers who went south to teach in All Bones Considered, Laurel Hill Stories number 70, when I discussed Laura Matilda Town. She spent her entire adult life teaching freedmen in Georgia. The government was assisted in teaching by many private individuals and organizations. On May 25, 1868, Mary Deborah Baird Biddle of 1623 Walnut Street, Philadelphia, purchased a 660-square-foot plot of prime property at Laurel Hill Cemetery. It sits on a spit of land near Millionaires Road. It's called K Point. That section is divided into 4 plots. She chose lot number 3, the southwest corner. The views of the Schuylkill River are spectacular. She paid the premium rate of $2 per square foot. Her husband, Captain Henry Jonathan Biddle, whom she had married on June 1st, 1854, now had a final resting place in Philadelphia. Henry Biddle, 1817-1862, was the son of Thomas Biddle, who was born in Philadelphia exactly 1 month before the Declaration of Independence was signed, and Thomas's wife, Christine Biddle. Henry's parents are buried at Laurel Hill East, Section G, Lot 247. His grandfather, Clement Biddle, 1740 to 1814, was an American Revolutionary War soldier who helped organize the Quaker Blues Volunteers and was Deputy Quartermaster General of the Pennsylvania and New York militia. After the war, Biddle became the first U.S. Marshal for Pennsylvania. He is interred at Christ Church Burial Grounds. Henry Biddle attended West Point in 1835, but he left for personal reasons in 1838, with a standing in class of 3rd in general merit. He married his distant cousin, Mary, 12 years his junior, and they quickly had 4 children together. In 1847, he advertised in local newspapers to raise a regiment to fight in the Mexican War. And when the Civil War started, he was commissioned a captain of volunteers and served as Assistant Adjutant General on the staff of Brigadier General George McCall. During the June 30th, 1862 Battle of Glendale, this is on the 6th day of the 7-Day War during the Peninsula Campaign, General George A. McCall, in charge of 5 Corps, ordered him to ride to the left of the Union battle line to change the direction of fire from 2 Federal artillery batteries. This Battle of Glendale involved at least 3 generals who were buried at Laurel Hill East. Leading 2 Corps, 2nd Division, 1st Brigade, Colonel Alfred Sully, who was later promoted to Brigadier General. In charge of the 4 Corps, 2nd Division, 1st Brigade, was the notorious womanizer, Henry M. Nagley. I have talked about both Sully and Nagley in prior podcasts. Under McCall, in 5 Corps, 3rd Division, Pennsylvania Reserves, leading the 2nd Brigade was Brigadier General George Gordon Meade, also interred at Laurel Hill East. And I have avoided doing a podcast about George Gordon Meade for more than 5 years now. I'm going to have to do one eventually. It was at the Battle of Glendale that Confederate President Jefferson F. Davis was inspecting the troops when they came under fire. If you were curious, the F in Jefferson Davis's name was purportedly for Finis, Latin for last. He was the 10th of 10 children, and I suspect that his mother said no more. Now, Davis himself was unharmed, but 2 of his companions were wounded and 3 horses were killed. McCall himself was captured when he mistakenly rode into the Confederate picket line after nightfall, looking for positions to place his rallied men. As Henry Jonathan Biddle carried out his mission, he came too close to the Confederate lines and was wounded by a volley from the 47th Virginia Infantry. Captain Biddle was taken to the Chimborazo Hospital in Richmond. At that time, it was the largest military hospital in the world. Its unusual name came from its location on Chimborazo Hill, which had been named for a mountain that it resembled in Ecuador. This was the primary Confederate hospital. There were 90 hospital wards. All of them had shingled roofs, wood plank floors, whitewashed walls, both interior and exterior. Each side of the building had 3 doors and 10 windows. Each window had a white curtain. Each ward was warmed by a wood stove and lit at night by a single candle. Each ward measured 80 feet by 20 feet and contained approximately 40 beds. Let's see, 90 wards, 40 beds. That's 3,600 patients it could hold. In addition to hospital wards, there were also bakehouses, kitchens, ice houses, a soap house, a stable, a guardhouse, a chapel, a bathhouse, a carpenter, blacksmith, apothecary shops, and 5 dead houses. Each building was surrounded by wide avenues, as the surgeon in charge believed that fresh air was a medical necessity for recovery. Despite its superficial appearance of efficiency, Chimborazo was always short of medical staff and medicines. There was little enough to alleviate the suffering of Confederate soldiers, never mind soldiers and officers from the Union Army. Nonetheless, every effort was made to give excellent care, and their mortality rate was a rather shockingly low 8.3 to 10.3%. Now, Henry's family members first received word that he had been killed. Then Henry's brother Thomas got a letter from General McCall with reassuring words. "I enclose you here with a note from your brother Harry, and the only reply I have had to 2 notes written to him on the 3rd of July. I learned for the first time he was a prisoner. I trust he will be well enough to travel and perhaps visit his family on parole. Express to Mrs. Biddle my sincere and deep conviction that it will not be long before her husband joins her, with all his honors." One of the surgeons caring for Harry helped him compose his letter home. "Captain Biddle desires me to say that he is wounded twice by bullets, in shoulder across the back and through the left arm. I think him not mortally wounded." Biddle himself added a comment. "I laid out in the field, mud hole, house, and woods till dusk on the 2nd, and reached here at midnight." Biddle fell under the care of Virginia physician Dr. Edwin Harvey Smith, 1813-1891. They actually struck up a friendship. Attempts to repatriate him to the Union were unsuccessful, and despite good care, he worsened. In a letter dated July 20th, 1862, with the heading Chimborazo Hospital, dictated to an attendant and addressed to Mary, Harry writes, "I have fought the battle of life as hard as I could, but I feel that I am now going. I write to bless you and all my dear children. Good night. May God bless you." That evening he died, 20 days after he was injured. He was buried near the hospital at Richmond. It was toward the end of the war that his remains were exhumed and returned to Philadelphia and eventually put in Cape Point. Now, as far as we know, there were no letters between Mary Biddle and Dr. Smith, the caring doctor down in Chimborazo. But correspondence must have been struck sometime in 1865, because when the war was over, Mrs. Biddle purchased a silver pitcher, and she had it engraved. On one side is inscribed the scripture from the book of Matthew, "I was sick, and you came on to me." On the other side, a personal message which reads in part, "As a mark of gratitude and esteem for his extreme kindness, July 1862, the pitcher was sent to the Smith home in Richmond." In 1867, representatives of the Freedmen's College of North Carolina reached Mary Biddle's Presbyterian congregation in Philadelphia. Her response to a plea for funds was to memorialize the life and sacrifice of her husband in a lasting way. The university's website tells us she pledged $1,400 toward the school. That's equivalent to about $30,000 in 2025. But it's also only a few dollars more than she spent on the burial plot at Laurel Hill East. So the college that she started was only a few bucks more than the cemetery plot. The college website also tells us that, quote, "Friends requested Mrs. Biddle name the newly established school after her late husband, Major Henry Biddle," end quote. So it became Biddle College. That was a name it would carry from 1867 until 1921. In 1883, the main academic and administrative building of the school was dedicated as Biddle Hall. It is an imposing neo-Gothic academic hall that still stands. Freedmen's College of North Carolina, Johnson C. Smith University's original name, was founded in 1867 by the Reverend S.C. Alexander and the Reverend W.L. Miller. JCSU holds in its archives a sword that belonged to Captain Biddle. In 1867, Colonel William R. Myers, an officer in the Confederacy, gave 8 acres of farmland on Beatty's Ford Road, west of downtown Charlotte, to the school. In 1876, the charter was changed by the North Carolina legislature to allow the school to become Biddle University. But it was in the early 1920s that Jane Berry Smith donated funds for several buildings in the name of her husband, businessman Johnson Crane Smith. And the institution changed its name to Johnson C. Smith University. Biddle Hall, however, retained its name and remained the center of the campus. It was in 1924 that James Duke established the Duke Endowment. This requires that 4% of the endowment's earnings must be given to Johnson C. Smith University. Its current enrollment is 1,300 students, 160 academic staff, and the current endowment is $51 million. 2 of Henry Biddle's sons grew up to be in the military. One, Jonathan, a West Point graduate, was killed in the Battle of Bear Paw. I spoke about him at length in All Bones Considered, Laurel Hill Stories number 51 from June of 2023, killed by Indians. Spencer Fullerton Baird Biddle, 1859-1929, was the second son and third oldest child of Henry and Mary Deborah Baird Biddle. He was named for his uncle, Spencer Fullerton Baird, second curator of the Smithsonian Institution. I had talked about the collection of the money for the Smithsonian way back in All Bones Considered, Laurel Hill Stories number 5. It was about attorney generals. I told about how President Andrew Jackson had sent former United States Attorney General Richard Rush, Laurel Hill East Section P, to collect James Smithson's legacy of 105 sacks that contained 104,960 gold sovereigns, worth more than $500,000 back then, currently equivalent to at least $15 million. The Smithsonian collections include 156 million artworks, artifacts, and specimens. Now, Spencer was 4 years old when his father died. He was 18 when his older brother died. He went to the United States Naval Academy in 1878 when he was 19 years old. And then he served for 2 years aboard the USS Quinnebog, which was armed with Parrott rifles and Dahlgren smoothbores. If you remember, I talked about Admiral John Dahlgren and his son, Colonel Ulrich Dahlgren, way back in All Bones Considered, Laurel Hill Stories number 10, February of 2020, Friends of Abraham Lincoln. The Quinnebog, which is named after a river in Massachusetts, got fitted out at Norfolk, Virginia in 1878 and sailed to Gibraltar to serve as part of the European squadron for a decade. After Spencer served 2 years of his commission, he headed to where any true Navy man would be comfortable: Montana. In 1881, he was now known as S.F.B. Biddle. Biddle and William Furden purchased a 400-acre ranch at the mouth of the Horse Creek on the Powder River in what was then the Montana Territory. Their activities were documented in the Miles City newspaper, the Yellowstone Journal. Messrs. Furden and Biddle have heretofore run to Shorthorn Blood, but this year branched off to the Hereford, believing them to be the best strains, all things considered. They bought more property as it became available. In 1885, S.F.B. Biddle became a founding member of the influential Montana Stock Growers Association. He also served as a representative from Custer County, which at that time included all southeastern Montana, to the 1885 Cowboy Legislature. During this period, open-range stockmen held significant influence in Helena. The legislature enacted laws that restricted branding to the official roundup season and established the position of territorial veterinary surgeon with authority to quarantine cattle. Additionally, they created the Board of Stock Commissioners to oversee brand inspection at marketing locations and to supervise the broader range industry. S.F.B. Biddle played an active role in all of these formative developments within the ranching community in southeastern Montana. Montana finally became the 41st state to join the Union in 1889. In 1892, Biddle and Furden ended their business partnership when Furden got married. Now, that same year, S.F.B. Biddle acquired the Cross Ranch from E.H. Johnson and W.W. Graham. Although their ranch's brand was originally a simple cross, a plus sign, Biddle opted not to use it due to the ease with which rustlers could alter it to resemble the window pane brand that they favored. Instead, Biddle used 7OL as his official brand, 7 representing an upside-down L and vice versa. Shortly after he purchased the Cross Ranch, S.F.B. married Molly Scott, a divorcee in Philadelphia. He informed her that they could reside either on a ranch in Montana or in Paris, France. To accommodate his new wife, he constructed a large, ornate lodge. Employees were hired to provide household support. However, records indicate that the new Mrs. Biddle did not show a lot of interest in cattle ranching. The Cross Ranch headquarters was built in 1893 with the intention of meeting his wife's preferences. It's located east of Montana Highway 59. It's about 26 miles south of Broadus, Montana. And the building features a French colonial design, which is pretty uncommon for a ranch sitting in Montana. The architectural elements include a porch that surrounds all 4 sides, supported by wooden columns, piece-sur-piece walls, and a hip roof. The winter of 1886-87 was particularly harsh. Hundreds of thousands of cattle died. Dozens of ranchers went bankrupt. In a search for hardier stock, S.F.B. was the first known American rancher to import Highland cattle from Scotland. Those are the coos with the hair over their eyes. I've been hiking in Scotland a couple of times, and I had to just stop and admire every Highland coo that I ran into while I was hiking the Great Glen Way. or the West Highland Way. During his 34 years as a rancher in Montana, S.F.B. Biddle traveled extensively, and he maintained close ties with his family in Philadelphia. Yet he remained actively involved in the ranching enterprise. The headquarters that he constructed for the Cross Ranch may have been influenced by his efforts to persuade his wife to join him in Montana. It comprises of 3 log buildings on approximately 1 acre in Powder River County, near the confluence of the Ranch Creek and the Little Powder River. In 1996, Cross Ranch was listed on the Registry of Historic Places. Biddle initially acquired about 400 acres, including the headquarters site and the irrigated hayfields along Ranch Creek. Over time, he expanded his holdings to around 3,000 deeded acres, which he subsequently sold to Bob Eccles in 1915. The fate of Molly Scott is unknown. But July 7, 1895, Spencer F.B. Biddle married Mary D. Gray in Kings, New York. S.F.B. gradually spent less time at the ranch, yet his contributions proved enduring. As an inventor, he designed and patented the Biddle tent, a single-person shelter intended for the use on the range. He also developed a horse restraint device which is operable by one individual for horse shoeing and other equine tasks. Recognized for his expertise as a blacksmith, SFB is credited in several accounts with constructing much of the Cross Lodge personally. Many of his employees remained with him throughout the 34 years that he operated the ranch in Montana. SFB often described the Powder River country as his elixir of life. The town of Biddle, Montana, current population 61, bears his name in recognition of his legacy. When the Spanish-American War started, he re-enlisted in June of 1898. Lieutenant Biddle, age 39, served on the USS Fishhawk and was honorably discharged in October 1898. After they left the ranch, they traveled to Paris, joined a group of expatriates that became the Smart Set and eventually the Lost Generation. Ernest Hemingway, Gertrude Stein, F. Scott Fitzgerald, many others. The Biddles also became art collectors. In 1913, along with several other American expatriates, including J. Pierpont Morgan, they helped establish the American Hospital of Paris to provide medical care for Americans who lived in or were visiting the city. This hospital continues to operate. It's funded by donations and patient payments without financial support from either the French or American government. It is the only hospital in continental Europe that is accredited by the Joint Commission. It offers a 24/7 emergency department and access to more than 500 consultants. When the Great War broke out in 1914, the 55-year-old Biddle tried to re-enlist, but he was turned down because of a bad heart and he was blind in one eye. But he was a multi-war veteran who spoke fluent French. He ended up serving Navy intelligence with distinction. Mary Biddle died in 1926 at age 72. Spencer Fullerton Baird Biddle died in Paris on April Fool's Day of 1929 at age 70. Their bodies were brought from Paris, and they were interred at the family plot in Cape Point on May 1st, 1929. And Spencer has a beautiful cradle grave, only a few feet from that of his brother, killed by Indians, and his father, killed in the Civil War, with a university named for him. What's on the calendar? Lots of stuff coming up in August, as I hope the heat breaks a little bit. Starting on August 2nd, Saturday, 3 p.m., Nurture with Nature. This is a hands-on workshop crafting stunning fresh bouquets using professional arranging techniques, highlighting 3 I'm reading now from the website, highlighting 3 incredible native plants, teaching you how to identify and incorporate them into both your home and landscape. And you leave with your own personal hand-arranged bouquet and a personalized herbal tea blend. There is a Death Cafe on Tuesday, August 5th at 6 p.m. This is an online meeting. It's a place for strangers to meet and talk openly and authentically about death. Public group-led discussions. No agenda, no objectives. Just pour yourself tea again and join. I guess you could drink beer or wine also if you wanted to. I don't know why we always say tea when it comes to cemetery stuff. Yeah. Bring a flask of vodka if you want to. There's a members-only Champion Tree Tour on Tuesday, August 5th at 5:30 p.m. Is that at West? Yeah, that's at West. That is if you're a member of the Friends of Laurel Hill. And now I assume Aaron is running that, but I don't see. Oh, yeah, there it is. Aaron Greenberg, Arboretum Manager, resident tree genius. No kidding. This departs from the conservatory. And anyway, that's a nice tree tour. So what else we got? We've got the 17th Annual Classic Hearse Show, Saturday, August 9th, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Laurel Hill East. That is an RSVP thing. Coffin cruisers from across the decades, classic car buffs, fellow car buffs. I may try to sneak in there with some copies of the book. I'm going to have some copies of the book next week, and might try to sell them at the classic Hearse show that's coming up. I do have a virtual tour coming up Tuesday, August 12th. It is a virtual Sacred Spaces and Storied Places tour. 6:30 p.m. Tuesday, August 12th. Free, or pay what you wish, but RSVP. There's a Hotspots and Storied Plots tour on Friday, August 22nd at 10 a.m. Steve Chihuahua is the host for that one. There's a Sacred Spaces and Storied Places on Saturday, August 23rd from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And Pam McMahon is your guide on that. Another Nurture with Nature, Saturday, August 23rd, 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Members only, Mimosas in Mausolea on Sunday, August 24th from 10 a.m. until noon. Is that the one that Sarah does, or is that the one that Mike? No, that's Marty. So that's at East. Okay, this is some inside the Mausolea at East. I have a feeling that one is already quote-unquote sold out, even though it's free. Yeah, there are no tickets available. Sorry about that. That's why you become a member. You get these notices early, and then when they have the open mausoleum tours. And then on August 30th, Saturday, Civil War Tour in South Laurel Hill. Finally, Andy and Russ are going to get to the south. That means we're going to talk about Pemberton. Oh, wait a minute. No, that's Jerry McCormick is doing that one. I apologize. I thought that was Andy and Russ. Let's see. He's got 321 identified veterans in South Laurel Hill. That's going to be a good show. That's going to be a great tour. I may get a podcast or two out of that. So that's what's coming up. Do I have any readings in August? I don't think so. I don't think my first reading is until September. Yeah, in fact, my first reading is on my birthday, Gladwin Library on Wednesday, September 24th at 2 p.m. And then I am doing an accessible hotspots tour. Oh, wait a minute, is that me? No, excuse me, that's not me. Somebody's doing an accessible hotspots tour on the 26th. Ludington Library, Tuesday, October 7th. Malakinwood Library, Thursday, October 16th. Lower Merion Historical Society on October 28th. So yeah, I've got some readings coming up. I'll tell you about more as the time comes closer. Let's get back to the podcast. Joseph Horton, 1826-1909. The law without morals is useless. For the 40-year span between 1874 and 1914, the Monumental Bronze Company of Bridgeport, Connecticut, was the only producer of a unique type of grave marker in the United States. The material that they used was double misnamed as white bronze. It was bluish gray, and it was 100% zinc. During the company's history, it produced grave markers cast in zinc made from sand molds that were fused together, sandblasted, and lacquered to produce the bluish-gray finished product that imitated stone. The original casting was done in the Bridgeport foundry, but there were subsidiaries in Chicago, Detroit, Des Moines, New Orleans, Philadelphia, and St. Thomas, Canada. These subsidiaries became the finishing and distribution centers. Bridgeport and its subsidiaries did not have showrooms. Grave markers were sold through catalogs and part-time salesmen. Their old catalogs are available for download from archive.org. The beauty of zinc is that you could choose whatever symbol you wanted pressed into the metal to the slightest detail. Anything from a crucifix to an elephant. And as new occupants entered the lot, the old zinc panel could be removed and an updated one screwed into place. The hollow, dull gray markers, nicknamed Zinkies, were only moderately successful. There are no more than a half a dozen of these at both Laurel Hill East and Laurel Hill West. Mystic and medium Catherine Drinkhouse Smith has a 5-sided zinc shrine that's topped with an open book not far from the gatehouse at East, while the Yohe monument at West barely escaped destruction from a fallen tree during a recent storm. They were cheaper than marble and granite. They did not require craftsmen as skilled as stone carvers. They were not accepted by Philadelphia's upper class, who thought they looked cheap. More than a century later, they looked pretty good for something that was considered tawdry back then. In 1914, the U.S. government took over the Monumental Bronze facilities to make gun mounts and munitions for the Great War, and the company never made another grave marker. Some cemeteries actually banned metal grave markers. The company struggled through the Great Depression and declared bankruptcy in 1939. A craftsman had been using zinc for millennia, even before it had a name. There was a copper-zinc alloy, brass. It's been known since the 3rd millennium BCE, but the element zinc was not even named until the early 16th century by the alchemist Paracelsus. German chemist Andreas Sigismund Marggraf is credited with discovering and isolating pure metal zinc in 1746. Work by Luigi Galvani and Alessandro Volta uncovered the electrochemical properties of zinc by 1800. At ordinary temperatures, zinc is relatively inert. This quality in the early 19th century led to its use as a roofing material, somewhat later as a means to galvanize iron to prevent rust. But as temperatures rise to zinc's melting point of about 434 degrees centigrade, that's 813 degrees Fahrenheit, zinc becomes active. In the presence of oxygen, it catches fire, it burns brightly, and it forms dense white smoke that's known as zinc oxide, also known by alchemists as philosopher's wool. If the heating is in the absence of oxygen, the zinc is volatilized at about 900 degrees centigrade. Now this is still below what is needed to release zinc from its ore. This is why it remained unknown for so long. If the ore was heated to the point that zinc would be released, it either oxidized or escaped with the smoke, or if a strong reducing agent were present to take up the oxygen, it escaped as pure zinc vapor. By 1805, ways had been found to make pure zinc malleable so that it could be rolled into sheets, and now it could be used for roofing and packing. And then there was the brass business. Brass and bronze are copper alloys with similar but different properties. Brass, the copper-zinc alloy, has a relatively low melting point, and it's highly workable with both hand and tools. Although it is not ferromagnetic, it has good electrical and thermal conduction. Copper concentration of more than 2/3 leads to a softer alloy with a more golden color. Well, if you increase the zinc content, it improves the hardness, and it changes the color until it's more silver. Brass is corrosion resistant and, believe it or not, bactericidal. It's a low friction metal. It's not suitable for weapons or tools. It is also not suitable for marine use, as the salt water corrodes the zinc and leaves behind only copper. Which brings up the subject of brass monkeys. Every year or two, a meme bubbles up from the mysterious depths of the internet about the origins of the phrase, "cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey." It spins a fine tale that the phrase originated from the use of a shipboard brass tray called a monkey, which held cannonballs in stacks on warships in the 16th to 18th centuries. Supposedly, in very cold temperatures, the monkey would contract, which caused the cannonballs to fall off. This story has been thoroughly debunked by both naval historians and etymologists. Now, for one thing, the most obvious thing, if you leave iron shot open on the deck, it would rust in a matter of days, and rusty cannonballs put the cannoneer at risk of an exploding weapon when he used the ball. There is no written record of the phrase "cold enough to freeze the balls off a brass monkey" before the 20th century. Now, in the early days of trade with Japan, an ubiquitous souvenir was a small statue of 3 monkeys side by side. They represented hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. My grandmother Stanley had a trio of brass monkeys that kept her company from a kitchen shelf. She kept them about eye high. The earliest reference to brass monkeys in the 19th century have no references to balls at all. Instead, variously say that it's cold enough to freeze the tail, or the nose, or the ears, or the whiskers off a brass monkey, or hot enough to scald the throat or singe the hair off a brass monkey. Another early published instance of the phrase appeared in 1847 in a portion of Herman Melville's autobiographical narrative Ormuz. It was so excessively hot in this still brooding valley, shut out from the trades, and only open toward the leeward side of the island, that labor in the sun was out of the question. To use a hyperbolical phrase of Shorty's, it was hot enough to melt the nose off a brass monkey. The opposite end of the temperature spectrum was reached in an episode of the television series MASH, when on a particularly cold Korean night, Colonel Potter suggested, well, we'd better keep the brass monkeys in tonight. The two people most closely associated with the founding of the zinc industry of the United States were the Philadelphians Samuel Wetherell, 1829 to 1890, and Joseph Wharton, 1826-1909. while Wetherill has more than 70 close relatives interred at Laurel Hill East, including several other also named Samuel P. Wetherill. He is buried in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Between 1853 and 1860, Wetherill and Wharton alternated between collaboration and competition to establish profitable zinc oxide and metallic zinc plants for the Philadelphia and Lehigh Zinc Company in South Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Zinc production has two main branches. One is the manufacture of zinc oxide. The other is the making of metallic zinc, or spelter, as it is called in the trade. Now, oddly, in both Europe and the United States, the spelter and zinc oxide industries developed independently from the manufacture of brass. There was actually a copper and brass shop in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, from 1832 on. It eventually became a foundry, but its operation had absolutely nothing to do with the establishment near there of the American zinc industry. Now, at this time, there was such little literature on nickel and zinc that a man like Wharton, who is fluent in both German and French, could easily read it in his spare time. He could then describe the process in simple terms. The ore is first calcined, finely pulverized, and mixed with pulverized coal. This mixture is then placed in airtight retorts, set in furnaces, each furnace containing as many retorts as can be properly heated and tended. The furnaces must be strongly built, yet so formed as to allow full access to all the numerous retorts for the purposes of charging, cleaning, and replacing them. The retorts must be airtight, strong, and capable of enduring the fieriest heat. The furnaces are so strongly heated as to bring the retorts with their contents to a full white heat, which causes the carbon of the coal to take the oxygen from the zinc ore, thus liberating the metallic zinc. This zinc vapor escapes into condensers attached to the retorts, where it cools sufficiently to assume the liquid form, and whence it continually trickles or is drawn at certain intervals according to the construction of the apparatus. The operation combines the processes of reduction and distillation and does not succeed without great care, since a bad material for the retorts, a variation in the heat of the furnace, a wrong proportion of the ingredients of the charge, a want of skill or punctuality in the workman, or an accident to a furnace may cause considerable loss almost imperceptibly. In fact, a difference of 1/3 of the entire yield may readily occur between the quantities produced by two sets of workmen unequal in skill, but consuming the same quantities of material and having in all other respects equal advantage. I won't go into the details, but yes, Joseph Wharton did eventually hire Frederick Winslow Taylor, the efficiency expert. That's probably a story in itself. Zinc oxide had been known as an effective pigment for white paint since as early as 1780, but it did not become a commercially viable product until the 1840s. Large zinc deposits were discovered in northern New Jersey and Upper Southstone Township in Lehigh County, Pennsylvania. Early shipments of ore to England were a failure, as those furnaces could not get hot enough to extract the zinc from American ore. But here, the United States, and especially Pennsylvania, had a huge advantage. Only a few miles from these massive fields of zinc ore were located seemingly unlimited tons of anthracite coal, which when burned produced enough heat to extract the zinc oxide and purify it to a marketable form. Although zinc oxide based on white paints cost twice as much as the lead-based paints, considerably less volume of paint was needed, and of course, in retrospect, the toxicity of the heavy metal was avoided. Who is this Joseph Wharton? He was born in Philadelphia on March 3rd, 1826, the fifth of 10 children, to William and Deborah Fisher Wharton. He was raised as a devout Quaker and attended boarding schools in Byberry and Westchester, as well as Philadelphia, where he studied under a private tutor. He spent 3 years working on a farm in Chester County in the summer, while he studied chemistry and learned French and German in the winter. He was physically active, just over 6 feet tall. He was a member of the Camilla Boat Club. That was a founding member of the Schuylkill Navy. The Camilla disbanded in 1858. When Joseph was 19, in the style of the day, he apprenticed with a businessman for 2 years and became proficient in business methods and bookkeeping. His early sales ventures were in white lead, cottonseed oil, and bricks. In 1853, when he was about 27 years old, Wharton joined the Pennsylvania and Lehigh Zinc Company near Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. He quickly had the company turning a profit. It was in 1859 that he oversaw the first production of spelter in the United States. And by 1863, he had produced 9 million tons of spelter. He took a chance. He hired some zinc workers from Belgium. Joseph's knowledge of French allowed him to work with these men easily, and their results increased the productivity. During the Civil War, he was a pacifist and a non-combatant. He turned all of his possessions into ready securities, bought a horse and a wagon large enough for his family, and he drove up to Harvard, where he took on higher mathematics. He became an expert gemologist with a taste for the finer stones. Once at a dinner table where he was a guest, a giant emerald that belonged to the hostess was passed around for the admiration of all. Wharton's only comment was, "It would be of immense value if it were genuine." One of his close friends noticed that he was not an inductive thinker. He liked to reach out into the unknown and shape his destiny with the light that he could snatch. His knowledge of the Bible was also formidable, but he had studied a little Latin, less Greek, and no Hebrew at all. He did not have much of an ear for music, but he would sing with hearty exuberance. Wharton followed his success in zinc with a foray into nickel, which had been discovered in paying quantities in Lancaster Hills in 1852-53, but it was about 60 feet below the surface. There wasn't a lot of use for nickel at the time, so not a lot of effort was put into its recovery. Nickel ores are exceptionally hard to refine, as the metal has an exceedingly high melting point of 1453 degrees centigrade. It can only be separated from iron with difficulty. Well, during the war, Joseph Wharton was approached by U.S. Mint Director James Pollock to secure an American source of nickel to provide a source of raw material to make 1-cent pieces. So he took up the mining and manufacturing of nickel in Camden, New Jersey. He took a controlling interest in the Gap Mining Company. In 1866, Congress passed a law that authorized the creation of a 3-cent coin consisting of 75% copper and 25% nickel. This 3-cent coin became known as a nickel, while the 5-cent coin was called the half-dime, D-I-S-M-E. Rather than the French pronunciation, the Americans call that coin half-dime. They dropped the S. The half-dime was struck between 1792 and 1870. Well, Joseph Wharton took over the nickel business, and for a quarter century, his was almost the entire nickel industry in the United States, and about 1/6 of the world's supply. In 1864, he sold less than 3,000 pounds of nickel to the U.S. Mint. And what had started as merely a byproduct of copper and cobalt mining now turned into a major business of its own. It had the color of silver, but was less corrodable, which made it ideal for eating implements. Joseph Wharton's entry into the nickel business increased the world's supply of nickel such that the price dropped from $2 a pound to about $1.25 a pound in 1870. The tariff was only 15 cents a pound, far too low. But once his Camden Nickel Works was running full steam, Wharton fought for a tariff of at least 40 cents per pound on nickel and copper-nickel alloy. On May 16, 1866, a 5-cent piece of 75-25 copper-nickel alloy was authorized, and the coin called the nickel was born. Wharton's work with the mint turned it into a profitable venture for the first time, and the value of small change issued was much greater than the costs of coinage and distribution. During its years of prosperity, when large numbers of small coins were issued and reissued, the profits were considerable. For instance, more than $1 million profit each in fiscal 1867 and 1868. For more information on the U.S. Mint and Laurel Hill connections, go back to All Bones Considered number 42, Mint Condition, from September of 2022. Give you a lot of good information there. The demand for nickel fell away. After 1869, the mint no longer supplied Wharton with much income. He wrote in 1890, "It's safe to say that no one ever did or will grow rich by supplying nickel to the United States Mint." In addition to being a businessman, Wharton was a scientist. He published an impressive number of scientific papers, not only on metallurgy and chemistry, but on topics like the pigments of autumn leaves or the aftermath from the explosion of the volcano Krakatoa. Despite his proclamation about nobody growing rich, in the 4 years from 1873 to 1876, Joseph Wharton made a profit from his nickel business of more than $1,239,000 from customers who were not the U.S. Mint. The boom ended the next year when a civil engineer with a French penal colony in New Caledonia found a huge cache of ore that essentially dropped the bottom out of the nickel market. The Wharton family lived in a mansion, Bellevue, in North Philadelphia. It was near 29th and Allegheny, just across the street from what became the Tasty Cake Factory on Hunting Park Drive. Last time I drove down there, that factory was still there. It hasn't been active for years, but the factory is still there. Now, after his land was condemned and annexed by the city for construction of a reservoir, Joseph started to buy land in South New Jersey in the 1870s, and he eventually acquired 150 square miles in the area known as the Pine Lands. This contained an aquifer that was replenished by several streams and rivers. His plan was export water to Philadelphia. But opposition arose both in Pennsylvania and in New Jersey, and eventually New Jersey actually passed laws that forbids the export of water. Wharton purchased iron mines. He started a fish factory that produced fertilizer. He owned a forestry planting operation, a cranberry farm, a sugar beet farm. This was in attempts to replace the labor-intensive cane sugar. Sugar beets were very popular among Quakers. I've talked about that in the past also, especially back when I talked about Rachel Lloyd in an early podcast about women inventors and how she managed to essentially create the sugar beet industry in the 19th century. Wharton added furnaces to his foundries until he was producing more than 1,000 tons of iron daily. He owned more than 5,000 acres of ore-containing land, along with 7,500 acres of coal-containing land in Indiana County and 24,000 acres in West Virginia and New York. Iron and copper mines in Michigan, gold mines in Arizona and Nevada. He owned shares in the Redding, Lehigh Valley, San Antonio, Arkansas Pass, Oregon Pacific, and Hibernia Mine railroads. His biggest investment began in the 1870s when Joseph Horton bought interest in Bethlehem Iron Company, which produced pig iron and steel for railroads. A pig iron is an intermediate step between iron ore at the beginning and finished steel at the end. Pig iron is almost always intended for remelting, so it's not unusual to see irregular and impure samples of pig iron. Joseph Horton served as president of the American Iron and Steel Association and as a member of the Iron and Steel Institute. He led the electoral tickets for the Republican Party nomination of William McKinley for president. Any of a combination of these accomplishments would have been enough to keep the name Joseph Horton alive among fans of Philadelphia history. But the reason that his name is known around the world is because of his philanthropy. First, a group of Hicksite Quakers, led by Joseph's mother, Deborah Fisher Wharton, founded the coeducational Swarthmore College, several miles outside of Philadelphia. I have discussed in prior podcasts the differences among the various branches of Quakerdom, the Hicksites, the Gurneyeites, and the founding of the three Quaker colleges, Haverford, Bryn Mawr, Swarthmore. Joseph donated $150,000 for the construction of Wharton Hall on the Swarthmore campus, $40,000 to the endowment of the Chair of Economics and Political Science, $10,000 for the construction of a library, $15,000 for construction of a Friends Meeting House, and $10,000 for the construction of a science hall. He served on the Swarthmore Board from 1870 to 1909 and as its president from 1883 to 1907. But Joseph Horton had other ideas about education. From medieval Italy to the mid-1800s, apprenticeships had been the standard for business education. In fact, Horton was one of the last notable figures who trained this way. He learned accounting through hands-on experience. But as American business expanded into various industries, its leaders had less time to mentor apprentices, and education started to shift to separate freestanding institutions. Bookkeeping schools appeared. They offered only basic training. By 1881, there was a call for more comprehensive business education to better prepare future leaders for commercial and public roles. So in 1881, when William Pepper took over as provost of the University of Pennsylvania, he made immediate changes. On the day of his inauguration, he announced that Joseph Wharton had made a gift of $100,000 to start a business school. Wharton believed that all gentlemen, including businessmen, needed the liberal education, so he wanted his program to function within an established, reputable college. While engineering schools aimed to model business education on scientific training, the rise of the elective system allowed students to choose more practical courses in their final years. The new School of Finance and Economy was introduced as an elective after 2 years of traditional studies. Now, this was at a time when no collegiate business course existed elsewhere. Joseph Wharton spent 2 years developing his plans. He presented a detailed curriculum. He proposed instruction in business procedures based on practices passed down from master to apprentice, such as accounting, commercial law. He recommended that students learn bookkeeping applicable to a range of settings, including individuals, households, commercial and banking firms, manufacturing establishments, as well as banks, trusts, and even government. There were no business school facilities elsewhere in the country. There were no business school textbooks. Wharton's group started from scratch and built the business school model from the ground up. Instead of an apprenticeship system which taught a business, Wharton's model taught business in all of its forms, no matter what the commodity that was being produced and sold. Wharton outlined the creation of, quote, a professor of elementary and mercantile law to provide instruction in the constitutional, statutory, and common law relevant to business operations. Additionally, he emphasized the importance of teaching knowledge or science surrounding economic affairs. This included comprehensive coverage of the meaning, history, and functions of money, with particular attention to the essential attribute that money should be difficult to acquire. Another faculty member would address topics such as the advancement, decline, and geographical shifts of industries. Wharton's curriculum also incorporated the history and practice of modern taxation. All of these subjects, all of these topics were new for colleges in the United States. This was a revolutionary curriculum. It blended theoretical and practical knowledge in a way that had never been done before. Other courses, subjects like political economy, law and ethics. There were more traditional business topics, accounting, finance, marketing, but the multidisciplinary approach was designed to produce graduates who were not only skilled in business practices, but aware of the broader social, economic, and legal contexts in which businesses operate. Wharton School quickly overcame its initial reputation as a bunch of academic misfits, and the business school at Logan Hall started to churn out graduates who would almost immediately become prominent businessmen in Philadelphia and beyond. Wharton's global network began with the first 5 graduates. Among them was Shiro Shiba. He returned to his native Japan for a career in the Japanese Parliament. And another member, Robert Adams Jr., who later became U.S. Ambassador to Brazil. It was through a Wharton Fellowship that W.E.B. Du Bois undertook his classic study of the social and economic conditions of urban blacks before he went on to co-found the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People in 1909. In a university which had for a century and a half been a center of theory and liberal arts, the new Wharton School quickly proved the power of the pragmatics and brought Benjamin Franklin's dream of the most practical school to a height Franklin never envisioned. Wharton began to award MBAs in 1921 as the school rose to become a prominent national center of industrial research. Wharton alumni include Tesla, SpaceX, Twitter CEO Elon Musk, investor Warren Buffett, although Buffett did not graduate, U.S. President Donald Trump. Other alumni include current and former CEOs of Alphabet Inc., Boeing, Comcast, General Electric, HEB, Johnson & Johnson, Oracle, Pfizer, PepsiCo, and on and on and on. As Joseph Wharton aged, he stayed active, both physically and in business affairs. Until he was in his 70s, he skated with guests on the pond on his Ontalauna estate northeast of Philadelphia, and he'd often go on walks with his family after dinner. He never smoked tobacco. He rarely drank alcohol. When he was nearly 80, he visited his Nevada silver mine by canoeing down the Colorado River and descending into the mine in a bucket. When he was 81, he went to Germany with his grandson, Joseph Wharton Lippincott, to visit Kaiser Wilhelm II and had dinner on the Kaiser's yacht. He read widely in literature. He was an accomplished poet. Many of his poems were inspired by trips abroad. He wrote Stewardson's Yarn after an 1873 visit to Europe, The Royal Palm and the Sweet Reasonableness of a Yankee Philistine in Cuba after a visit to Cuba to inspect mines there, and Mexico after an 1889 visit to Mexico. A domestic journey to Nevada to see his gold mines there resulted in the Buttes of the Canyon. In 1907, Joseph Wharton had a stroke while he was in London. He survived and traveled home, but he never fully recovered his health. In 1908, he established the Wharton Steel Company with assets valued over $10 billion, and he transferred all of his coke, iron, limestone, pig iron, and railroad interests into this entity. His health was worsened by a fall, and he died at his Ontalauna estate at Old York Road and Shelton Avenue on January 11th, 1909, at age 82. He was interred in a large, fenced, multi-family lot at Laurel Hill East with loverings and parrots. It is striking for its plainness. It is almost identical, plain marble stones written in the Quaker style, and it's only a few feet from Hugh Mercer, Simon Gratz, Christine Wetherill Stevenson, and the first Pennsylvania Railroad president, Samuel Vaughan. I always joke that I could stand at that one spot and do an hour tour just by turning and pointing. In 1908, Wharton granted a 25-acre plot of forested land in the city of Philadelphia for the creation of a park, named for his mother. Fisher Park extends from Olney Avenue to Cheltenham Avenue and Fern Rock to Tabor. It is bounded on the west by SEPTA regional rail tracks and the Fern Rock Transportation Center and a commercial district to the east. In 1954, the Wharton family sold his vast Pinelands property in South Jersey to the state of New Jersey. The land forms the core of Wharton State Forest, the largest single tract of land in the state park system of New Jersey. It encompasses more than 1 million acres spread out across 7 counties and includes nearly 500 miles of unpaved roads. Well, you may know the Pine Barrens as home of the Jersey Devil. Legend has it that in 1735, a woman named Leeds was giving birth to her 13th child and exclaimed, "Let the child be the devil!" The child was born normally, but immediately grew wings, a tail, and claws, and flew out to the Pine Barrens. According to some, the child transformed into a creature with hooves, a goat's head, bat wings, and a forked tail. Growling and screaming, the child beat everyone with its tail before flying up the chimney and heading out into the pines. In some versions of this tale, Mother Leeds was supposedly a witch, and the child's father was the devil himself. Some versions of the legend also state that local clergymen subsequently attempted to exorcise the creature from the Pine Barrens. Now, of course, the local hockey team is named for the creature. In 1981, a Joseph Wharton 18-cent commemorative postal stamp was issued to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Wharton School. In 1997, Joseph Wharton was inducted into the National Mining Hall of Fame. Joseph Wharton had married Anna Corbett Lovering in 1854. They had a daughter named Joanna. Now, when he took a job as manager of Bethlehem Iron, the living arrangements were problematic for the young couple. Wharton lived alone in Bethlehem, and Anna took care of Joanna in Philadelphia. Anna did later come to live with Wharton in Bethlehem until he sold his interests in the zinc business and returned to Philadelphia. It was in the 1870s they built that estate named Bellevue. He also had a large home near Narragansett Bay in Rhode Island, which he called Marbella, and that is where they vacationed in the summertime. Joseph Wharton was also a guardian and mentor to many young people, particularly to a group of brothers by the name of Thurston. Wharton took care of them and watched as they too ventured into the business world. Joseph Wharton not only created opportunities for underprivileged boys and jobs for countless people, he created a lasting legacy. Wharton initially attended for his school to teach economic protection of American interests globally, the same issues he had labored for in Washington over protective tariffs. However, the Wharton School of Business grew to develop political and social sciences. The teaching of social and political science merged with the teaching of commerce and finance, creating one of the most prominent business schools in the world to this day, and the one that has produced the most billionaires of any school in the world. Now it also has campuses in San Francisco and in Beijing, and the MBA program annually receives around 7,300 applications for the 850 places in the class. Year after year, it is ranked as one of the top business schools in the world. the Wharton School. Antoinette Passo Westphal, 1937-2004. Drexel Forever. On December 17th, 1891, the new building of the Drexel Institute of Art, Science, and Industry was dedicated in front of the expected celebrities: U.S. Vice President Levi Morton, Pennsylvania Governor Robert Pattison, who's interred at Laurel Hill West. A couple of special guests: Andrew Carnegie, Thomas Edison. Most American college campuses were in the so-called collegiate Gothic style that was being promulgated at that time by architects Walter Cope and John Stewardson. Stewardson, who drowned in an ice skating accident on the Schuylkill, is interred at Laurel Hill East. The Drexel building was different. Situated on an urban corner, 33rd and Chestnut, 2 blocks from the tracks of the Pennsylvania Railroad, adjacent to the Allison Car Works, a firm that had made railroad cars since the 1860s. It was located on Walnut at the site of the current 1923 ice rink. The Drexel building looked like a suite of offices. The school offered no degrees, but a variety of courses in subjects ranging from art and illustration, mechanical arts, domestic arts and sciences, commerce and finance, teacher training, physical education, and librarianship. The university's founder, Anthony Drexel, was a huge believer in free, open-access education. He promoted lectures and programs that were open to the public, similar to what William Wagner had been doing in North Philadelphia for 40 years at the Wagner Free Institute. And like Wagner, which became a branch of the Philadelphia Free Library, Drexel granted access to its library to non-students. Another initiative was to offer classes in the evening when they could be attended by working professionals, similar to what Temple had been doing since 1884. But like most colleges and universities started in the late 19th century, Temple started as a religious college, Baptist in this case. Drexel never declared any religious affiliation. The school grew from 70 graduates in 1891 to 500 in 1913. Drexel started to grant the Bachelor of Science degree in 1914. In 1919, Drexel introduced its cooperative education program, in which students could alternate studying with full-time professional employment. In 1927, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania gave Drexel the privilege to grant the Master of Science degree. And in 1936, the school became the Drexel Institute of Technology. Though banker-philanthropist Anthony Tony J. Drexel gave his name and part of his fortune to what is now Drexel University, he was an extremely private man. When the Drexel Institute of Art, Science, and Industry requested a portrait of its founder in 1892, Tony refused, until his lifelong best friend and business partner, George W. Childs, who's interred on Millionaires Row at Laurel Hill East, eventually persuaded him to get the portrait done. And then Drexel would only have the portrait done if Childs was also painted, if the school didn't pay the $5,000 artist fee, and if the painting would not be hung at the Drexel Institute of Art, Science, and Industry until after his death. Now, this was such a rare event for Tony Drexel to agree to have his likeness painted that both his family and Drexel and Company, the family business, requested their own copies. Drexel was so notoriously press-shy that he did not even show up for the opening dedication of his own school. But then again, his wife of many decades had died only a few weeks before, and he was in mourning. The Drexels were also close friends to the Ulysses S. Grant family, thanks in part to annual vacations in their adjacent summer homes in Long Branch, New Jersey. Anthony's daughter, Fanny, was a bridesmaid at the 1874 White House wedding of Ulysses' daughter, Nellie, and Ulysses attended the 1872 wedding of Anthony's daughter, Emily. Anthony advised Ulysses on financial matters, both personal and professional. He invested the gifts and financial income Ulysses received after the Civil War and helped raise funds to purchase 2 houses for the Grants, one at 2009 Chestnut Street in Philadelphia in 1865, and one at 3 East 66th Street in New York City in the 1880s. And while Anthony declined Ulysses' offer to become Secretary of the Treasury, he still provided counsel and advice to the president. Drexel served as a pallbearer at Grant's funeral. Tony Drexel was raised as a Roman Catholic. His niece is St. Catherine Drexel. But he converted to Episcopalianism in adulthood. He lived for less than 2 years after he started his school, and he is buried at Woodland Cemetery. His best friend of 40 years, George W. Childs, with whom he ran a newspaper and started the village of Wayne, died just a few months later. Some people say it was of a broken heart. I will probably do a podcast about Childs eventually. One of the initial divisions at Drexel was the Department of Domestic Economy, 1891-1894. Established to offer educational programs specifically for women in areas such as cookery, dressmaking, and other domestic arts. This department subsequently expanded its curriculum to encompass domestic science, home economics, dietetics, and child care, with infants and children from a local orphanage participating in some of the courses. Over the years, the institution gradually introduced programs in design, applied arts, and performing arts, while phasing out those focused on domestic tasks. Throughout its history, this academic unit evolved through several iterations. The Department of Domestic Sciences and Arts, 1895 to 1914, School of Domestic Science and Arts, 1914-1922, School/College of Home Economics, 1922-1974, Nesbitt College of Design, Nutrition, Human Behavior, and Home Economics, 1974-1985, Nesbitt College of Design Arts, 1985-1998, and ultimately the College of Design Arts, 1998 to 2005. Then, on October 18th, 2005, Drexel President Constantine Papadakis, who was interred at Laurel Hill West, announced that the College of Media Arts and Design, COMAD, would be named after the late Antoinette Westphal, 59, honorary 02, at the request of her husband, Rainer Ray Westphal, 59, honorary 02. Mr. Westphal pledged the largest single private donation in Drexel University's history. Antoinette had been an active voice for the college's alumna as part of the Alumni Advocates Group, as well as being the 2003 recipient of the prestigious Alumni Rankin Epstein Award. The Westphal family was among the most generous and engaged of Drexel alumni, donating their time and their money to the university for many years. Antoinette Westphal had led a busy life as a co-ed at Drexel, where everyone knew her as Nettie. At the time, she was living in Haverford, where she'd attended high school, and she seemed to be involved in everything. At Drexel, she chose home economics as her major. As a 4-year member of Sigma Sigma Sigma, she was Rush Chair for 2 years and Panhellenic representative during her junior and senior years. She spent all 4 years in co-ed sports, on both the field hockey team, which she captained in her senior year, and lacrosse, which she captained in her junior year. She also wrote anonymously for the campus newspaper Gossip Column as the court jester. One column began with the doggerel verse, Each week we meet to write this dirt. Our jests are fun, so don't be hurt. Our names are known by you, we think. Can you find the missing link? Think. The columns were just what they promised, campus gossip. Who was attracted to who? What parties were popular? Who was the current cutest lady in waiting? Or maybe female operator of the week? Or question of the week, should Ethel wear her hair up or down? Or Paul Potts got his date for the ball at the really last minute. Ask him. It's quite a story. At Antoinette's surprise 21st birthday, she was paired with fellow Drexel dragon Rainer Westphal, son of German immigrants. She was Sigma Sigma Sigma, he was Tau Kappa Epsilon. Ray was studying this new field of computer science on Drexel's behemoth magnetic drum vacuum tube IBM 650, which had been recently installed. It weighed about 3 tons, it was programmed by punch card, and it had memory that would easily fit onto a thumb drive today. Ray played basketball. He was a member of the Newen Club. Ray and Nettie married in 1960, and 3 children followed. Ray's education in computer science led to a job at Education Testing Services in Princeton, where he was part of the team that developed the scoring system for the SATs. For a while, he worked for Pete, Marwick, and Mitchell, and the family moved to Stratford on the Philadelphia Main Line. But in 1969, he was abruptly laid off. He literally found himself in an unemployment line, wondering what would come next. He was 36 years old with a wife and 3 kids. Ray found a job at Sorbus Corporation in King of Prussia, where he helped to develop a lease accounting system that included the corporate tax rate table feature. The unit was struggling, and with another layoff looming, he and Antoinette risked everything on a bet that the tax rate table was a niche opportunity to meet an unmet corporate need. In 1978, they started Vertex Inc. with 1 employee, a second mortgage, and a whole lot of determination. It took time, but over the next 20 years, the company grew into the leading public corporate tax compliance services that enabled companies to calculate, comply, and remit their tax obligations with confidence. And by the time that the Philadelphia Inquirer did a feature on Ray in 1992, Vertex had 88 employees and was doing $11 million in sales from more than 4,000 corporate customers. Vertex keeps tabs on more than 6,500 taxing jurisdictions in the United States and Canada. His main customers were large companies who operated in 10 or more states and who faced that many different state and local taxes. To them, Vertex Incorporated was a godsend. Antoinette started as a secretary for Vertex, but she found her own niche when she started a beauty salon in Paoli called Pour l'Image. In 1989, the Westfalls expanded when they opened a private spa in Tredyffrin Township. Antoinette operated a one-to-one basis between client and health professional. She offered hair, skin, and nail services and dietary advice. Antoinette won several Best of Philly awards and was named Small Business of the Year by the local Chamber of Commerce. In 2001, the Westfalls both retired. Their son took over the business, which went public in 2020. It is now valued at more than $1 billion. Both daughters are also significant shareholders. In 2002, Ray and Nettie made a large monetary contribution to Drexel's art gallery, which was renamed in their honor the Antoinette and Ray Westphal Picture Gallery. Most of the paintings had been collected by college founder Anthony Drexel. While he was alive, Drexel displayed his paintings and sculptures in his house, a sprawling Italian villa in the then countryside of West Philadelphia. He had purchased land between 38th and 39th Streets and Walnut Street in the 1850s, and he moved there from his former homestead on the south side of ritzy Rittenhouse Square. He then went on to build 5 mansions for his children within a block of his own home, which caused people to call the area the Drexel Family Compound and the Drexel Block. Now, his own palace had 41 rooms. It was the showplace of the colony, which also included the imposing residences of 3 of his sons and a daughter. With these clustered together, it was possible to go from one to the other without using public sidewalks. So wrote his great-granddaughter, Cordelia Drexel Biddle, in My Philadelphia Father, which was later turned into the Disney movie The Happiest Millionaire. It starred Fred MacMurray, Tommy Steele, and Greer Garson. Drexel's mansions were torn down in the early 20th century to make room for dormitories. His art collection stayed on campus and was mostly preserved, except for several pieces that were sold at a 1944 Park Burnett auction to raise funds and support the war effort. Most of those vended works were in storage. They were not on display. The university also sold more than 250 autographed manuscripts and letters from notable literary and historical figures to raise money for the war. Tony Drexel's taste in art was timid. It was fairly typical of 19th century Philadelphia businessmen. He tended to stick with safe European landscape and portrait artists of the Barbizon school. He bought artwork until his walls were full, and then he stopped. When he died less than 2 years after his school opened, he left the works to the school. An even larger bequest of paintings from Drexel's brother-in-law, John D. Lankanaugh, namesake for what had been the German hospital, followed in 1903. Initially, most of the Drexel art collection was kept in the main building. Antoinette recalled years later, "We used that room so much when we were students. We had teas there. We used it for inspiration for art classes. It was a wonderful, quiet time place." Now it would be known as the Antoinette and Ray Westfall Picture Gallery. That same year, Nettie and Ray Westfall, class of '59, were awarded honorary degrees for their contributions to Drexel University. Antoinette had been diagnosed with breast cancer in 1994. In typical Antoinette fashion, she raised funds for breast cancer research. As chair for Living Beyond Breast Cancer, she was director of breastcancer.org, an organization for breast cancer education. And in addition to her business ventures and her fundraising, she played golf, and she spent time with her family at their winter home in Naples, Florida. Antoinette Westfall died at age 67 at Bryn Mawr Hospital on November 16, 2004. She was buried in a mausoleum on a triangular spit of land near the Barmouth entrance in the Hanover section. She's on the same plot just a few feet from former Philadelphia school superintendent Constance Clayton and greeting card magnate Bernard Spain with his Cocktails at 6 crypt and nude torso next to his final resting place. In October of 2005, the Drexel College of Media and Design, known as COMED, was renamed the Antoinette Westfall College of Media Arts and Design after a donation of $25 million from Ray. At that time, it was the largest donation ever made to Drexel. The college is in a Robert Venturi building called Urban, URBN, that on the inside, to me, because of its exposed stairways and catwalks, reminds me of an Escher drawing the first time I went in there. It has evolved from a school for home economics to a massive college with 18 undergraduate fields, from animations and art history to fashion design, screenwriting. The graduate school offers 9 courses of study, including retail and merchandising, as well as television, media management. The college is the home to the Mandel Theater, the Pearlstein Gallery, DUTV, Drexel's television station. The Cal Rudman Institute for Entertainment Industry Studies. Mad Dragon Records, the only student-run radio label with a national distribution deal in the United States. And Drexel's Robert and Penny Fox Historic Costume Collection. All of that now part of Westfall. In 2005, Ray met the second love of his life, Cindy Kraft, and they married in 2008. He had a cabin in Utah as well as a winter home in Florida. Dementia chipped away at his memories and his personality until he died in August of 2023 and was interred next to Antoinette in their simple yet elegant mausoleum. Initially tucked in the shadow of the University of Pennsylvania in West Philadelphia, Drexel University has claimed its stake in the academic abundance of Philadelphia. It is now home for the medical school that evolved from the female medical college. Drexel offers more than 200 degree programs across 15 colleges and schools with an enrollment of approximately 14,000 undergraduate and 8,000 graduate students representing all 50 states and 93 countries. The institution employs more than 1,100 research faculty members and reported $160 million in research expenditures through grants awarded in 2022. Its current endowment is more than $1 billion, with assets of more than $2.5 billion. That's more than Temple. That's more than Villanova. It's less than Bryn Mawr or Swarthmore, though. And of course, it's only a small fraction of the University of Pennsylvania's near $15 billion endowment. Mario, the Magnificent Dragon, the bronze statue of the school mascot, the Drexel Dragon, was dedicated December 4th, 2002. Mario is 14 feet long, 10 feet tall. He weighs 4,100 pounds and sits on a 17-ton granite base. He's easily visible and serves as a landmark on campus, just as Meet Me at the Eagle became the rendezvous point in Center City. Meet Me at the Dragon is a good gathering spot in West Philadelphia. The dragon's name Mario was adopted in 1997 in recognition of a 1945 alumnus, Mario V. Mascoli, one of the biggest fans of Drexel men's basketball. Mascoli had not missed a single Dragons home game in more than 20 years, and in honor of his loyal support of Drexel athletics, as well as his professional, public service, and philanthropic accomplishments, the graduation class of 1987 presented Mascoli with the new costume of the mascot, as well as officially dubbing it Mario the Magnificent. Imagine that, to have a dragon named after you. In a manner of serendipity, which seems to have followed me through life, as I was working on this, I went to the Radnor Public Library about a week ago now to hear fellow tour guide Tom Keels give an excellent presentation on what happens when rich people buy bad art. If you have a chance to see it, I really recommend it. I was talking to Tom's husband, Larry, about my latest research, and there's a woman sitting not 3 feet away who seemed interested. She said, "Oh, Antoinette, I went to high school with her." My jaw dropped. It truly did. This woman confirmed that teenage Antoinette Westfall was someone who seemed involved in everything all at once, and yet never seemed overwhelmed. Antoinette Westfall's name will live on so long as the Antoinette Westfall College of Media Arts and Design stands in West Philadelphia.
I was always meant to come here, though I've never been
For the mid-August episode of Biographical Bites from Bala, Laurel Hill West Stories number 47, it's a mother-son team of poet, abolitionist, and microeconomist Sarah Louisa Vickers Oberholzer and her son, businessman historian Ellis Paxson Oberholzer. For September's All Bones Considered, Laurel Hill Stories number 78, it's Look Up in the Sky about Laurel Hill pilots. Probably part one. My favorite, I've got to admit, Major Holger Horace, Hoiris, but he had one of the greatest nicknames. His nickname was Holger Horace, because his first name was Holger, Holger. He was a stunt pilot. Jacques-Louis Francine, explorer, writer, decorated World War II veteran. Several residents were shot down in World War II, and their only representation in the cemetery is a cenotaph. Laurel Hill East is located at 3822 Ridge Avenue, the East Falls section of Philadelphia. It's an easy walk from the bus stop at Ridge and Allegheny for SEPTA buses 1, 61, and 82, formerly the R bus. Admission and parking in the lot across the street are free. Parking spaces are limited. You can pull onto the grounds, park where you know you won't block anyone. There's an app you can download for a self-guided tour through its 78 acres. Laurel Hill West, 225 Belmont Avenue in Bala-Cynwyd, parking at the main entrance and at the bell tower. Public transportation, SEPTA Regional Rail to Manayunk, or one of the many buses to the Wissahickon Transfer Center on Ridge Avenue. And then cross the Schuylkill River on the Pencoid pedestrian bridge and come up Writers Ferry Road. You can also take the 165 or 44 to the corner of City Avenue and Belmont and walk about 3 or 4 blocks south on Belmont, and that will take you in the back entrance. It's a pedestrian entrance only, but it opens at 7 o'clock like the other entrances, and it takes you right down Memorial Drive. It takes you right through a stack of mausoleums to get to the main part of the cemetery. So that's another way to get to Laurel Hill West. If you download the audios I've done for self-guided tours, they will help lead you on 40 to 45 minute audio tours that talk about people interred along the route. Both Laurel Hill East, Laurel Hill West are currently open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and we really welcome anyone who wants to come in. If you got a lot of cemeteries don't want you, no bicycles, no dogs, no picnics. Hey, bring your bicycle. I've seen groups, packs of bicycles, as many 30 people riding through the cemetery at the same time. Dog walkers, just leave your dog on a lead, please, please, please. But skateboarders, lots of folks love that cemetery, Laurel Hill East and Laurel Hill West. If you follow us on Instagram and Facebook, you get a daily reminder of our inhabitants. Instagram, my publicity person, Grace, is keeping me up fairly modern with my Instagram and my TikToks. Some of which have been watched quite a bit, a few thousand times. If you become a friend of Laurel Hill, you will get a discount on stuff from the discount, or from the gift shop. You'll get a discount on tours. You get free tours, like I mentioned before, inside the mausoleum tours. They may be cemeteries. There are a couple of the liveliest spots in town. Our theme song, Names at Peace, was written and performed by local artist James Harrow. All Bones Considered, Laurel Hill Stories, and Biographical Bites from Bala, Laurel Hill West Stories, are researched, written, narrated, and produced by me, Joe Lex, retired professor of emergency medicine at Temple University. Reach me through my email, jrlexjr1947@gmail.com. Remember to keep body and soul together until next time on All Bones Considered, Laurel Hill Stories, where the plot thickens. Stick around to hear the references that I used for this podcast. And until the next time we meet, stay safe, stay well, and stay above ground. Bibliography is coming up next, including the bibliography on Charles McAllister. Even though I have not written the script yet, I already know what my sources are going to be, so you're going to get that bibliography. For Charles McAllister, the first reference was when he donated the hotel to start the college. That's from the Minneapolis, Minnesota Star Tribune, August 28th, 1873. That made the first page. His obituary followed less than a year later, in December of 1873. Nice obituary from the Philadelphia Inquirer. And then his public bequests followed a couple of weeks after that. Board of Foreign Missions, Education, Presbyterian Education, to the Orthopedic Hospital, the St. Andrew's Society, and to the McAllister College of St. Anthony Falls, Minnesota, back before it was St. Paul. There's a nice big article on Glenn Ford from the Inquirer from May 29th, 2022, that talks about the history of that sprawling mansion a little bit. For Captain Biddle, the best reference is, you can guess from the title. It's called The Presbyterian Church in the Negro in North Carolina During Reconstruction by John L. Bell, Jr., North Carolina Historical Review, January 1963, Volume 40, Number 1, pages 15 to 36. And then From Slavery to Prominence in North Carolina, Preparation, by James A. Paget, Journal of Negro History, October 1937, Volume 22, Number 4, pages 433 to 487. Joseph Wharton. There is an article simply called Joseph Wharton, SCD, LLD. The author is Harrison Morris. It's on the Proceedings of the American Philosophical Society, Volume 48, Number 193, September through December 1909. Pages Roman numeral, what do we got here? 71 through 76. Published by the University of Pennsylvania Press. The work of the Wharton School of Finance and Commerce by Roswell C. McCrae, Journal of Political Economy, Volume 21, Number 2, February 1913, pages 111 to 116. Samuel Wetherill, Joseph Wharton, and the Founding of the American Zinc Industry. W. Ross Yates, the Pennsylvania Magazine of History and Biography, October 1974, Volume 98, Number 4, pages 469 to 514. Joseph Wharton's Nickel Business by W. Ross Yates, the Pennsylvania Magazine of History and Biography, July 1977. Volume 101, Number 3, pages 287 to 321. And finally, on Wharton, Getting Down to Business, the Development of the Commercial Curriculum at the Wharton School in 1910. It's by Stephen A. Sass, Business and Economic History, 1981, Volume 10. Papers presented at the 27th Annual Meeting of the Business History Conference, May 5th through 7th, 1981, pages 71 to 81. The information for Antoinette Westfall for Antoinette and Ray, a lot of it came from the obituaries, but also that nice article that was in Drexel Alumni Magazine back in 2003. And I want to thank the Alumni Association. I couldn't find it online, and I emailed them, and within 24 hours they had sent me this gorgeous 2-page article with pictures of Ray and Antoinette as students at Drexel and pictures of some of the artwork. It's really a nice little 2-page summary. What month was that? Winter. That's winter 2003, the Drexel magazine. What else did I use for Antoinette and Ray? Yeah, mostly newspaper articles. The biggest newspaper article was probably the one in the Philadelphia Inquirer on February 10th, 1992. For sales tax data, he's a prime source. Got a picture of Ray and his son Jeff. I think I covered it. I felt a little scattershot at the end there, but I've got to admit, once the book went to press a couple of days ago, it's like this giant weight was lifted off of my shoulders and replaced by another giant weight. That is actually going out and promoting and selling the book now, and working on the next ones, because I've got enough material to do at least 3 more books, plus the one I want to do with all the letters I sent home from Vietnam. It's fun to be making a bucket list just before your 78th birthday for all the cool things you want to do. Okay, thank you for listening. Thanks for listening to my rambling. If I don't see you before then, maybe you can come out to the Market of the Macabre and pick up your copy of the book directly from me. I will be happy to personalize it for you. So keep that in mind. Stay safe, stay well, stay above ground.